Hello, hello. We are live. I'm so excited to be back. Today, I am talking with a lovely, lovely person. I will introduce her shortly, but this is my journey to becoming. And we regularly speak with different professionals to get an idea of the path that they took to get where they are today. And today, as I said, a very lovely person, and her name is Jasmine Shaw. So,
Hello.
Jasmine, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Lisa. I'm so excited to be on your show. So my name is Jasmine Shaw. I am a professional engineer turned project manager. I'm based in Ottawa, like Lisa, and I started out my career as an engineer, as we're going to talk about, but then made several pivots along the way to where I am now working in project management in the biotech industry. And I'm super passionate about supporting women in STEM. That's really one of my professional callings. So I love mentoring, championing, advocating for women in STEM, which we might talk about as well. But yeah, thank you again for having me.
Awesome. And that's how we met through the Women in Communications and Technology. I think we had met before at some events,
Yeah.
and then I joined the board last year. And
Mhm.
when I initially met you, I was like, this person is at all the events. Like, how do you do it? It's amazing. And like, you volunteer, you contribute so much. So the work that you're doing is absolutely amazing. But I'm always curious to know, is this what you always wanted to do? Like growing up, was the plan always to be an engineer? I don't think project manager, because it seems like that came along afterwards, which we'll talk about, but was the plan always to be an engineer?
So no, it was not. So I think when I think about like what I really wanted to do when I was younger, like the kinds of things that I really enjoyed, I was just a very deeply curious child. So I was drawn to fields that involved a lot of like investigation or analysis. So I remember when I was a kid, there was like a period where I wanted to be an archaeologist. I was like super like obsessed with like ancient civilizations, and I thought like the idea of being an archaeologist, like digging up like, fossils or like, ancient ruins was like the coolest thing ever. So that was, I had that, went through that period for a while. Then I had the like, I want to be a doctor period that I feel like a lot of ambitious kids go through.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a designer for a while, like more on the architect side of things, but my like artistic skills are a little bit lacking, so that kind of fell off. And I think ultimately like engineering kind of landed when I was in high school. When I started to narrow in on like, okay, I'm good at math and sciences. That's what all the kids say who go into engineering. But it wasn't until someone came to my high school from Carleton University and did a
Mm.
presentation about engineering, kind of talking about the programs at Carleton, explaining, why engineering is awesome, that I was like, oh, perhaps this is something that I should consider. So that was really like end of grade 11, early grade 12. So fairly late in the, school journey when I decided that engineering was something I was going to pursue.
That's amazing. And it shows that, those presentations or those people that they send in
Yeah,
schools, they do make a difference, right? That's
exactly.
awesome. And so
Exactly.
what education did you pursue to get where you are now?
Yeah. So the biggest, I would say like obstacle that I overcame to like get into engineering was actually like in high school. So it was grade 12 physics is like mandatory to get into engineering. You have to pass grade 12 physics, you have to get a good mark. And I was really struggling with grade 12 physics. It was just like the concepts were really difficult. So I remember like I had like maybe a 50% grade like going into like midway through the course. And I was like, I really need to like get my butt in gear. I need to turn things around. So I went for extra help with my physics teacher like basically every day for like
Oh,
the entire semester, just trying to like really like spend time to understand the concept. So I really kind of grinded it out to get grade 12 physics so that I could get accepted into engineering. And then I studied biomedical and mechanical engineering at Carleton University. So went through that program. And then after I graduated, a couple of years into working, I did my master's degree, but it was in a totally different discipline than what I studied, which I actually
mm.
found was a really great choice because it meant that I wasn't getting so specialized. I was going a little bit broader and expanding out beyond engineering into more like management and innovation. So that was really cool as well. And then to get my professional engineering license, you need 4 years of work experience. You need to pass an exam. So I did that, and that really kind of made up my formal engineering education
Yeah,
and training.
super interesting. So, what was your master's degree in?
My master's, so it's called Technology Innovation Management, and
Ah,
it's kind of like I'd kind of describe it as like it's not quite an MBA, but it's not quite an engineering degree. It's like not super deeply technical, but it's not like how to manage, a big company like an MBA is. It's more kind of the middle ground of like how to start a tech company or like how to bring a new
oh,
product to market. So it's very much about like the early stages of both like the life cycle of a business as well as like the technology life cycle. Like how do you actually create new products and bring them to market? Like how do you identify product market fit. So it was really cool because it kind of exposed me to like the entrepreneurship side of things,
mm-hmm.
which I had never really seen before working in like in the industry. So that was really cool, and that kind of broadened my horizons and kind of made me think about like what else I could be doing other than like hands-on engineering.
Amazing. And was that at Carleton as well?
Yeah, I was at Carleton, and I did that. I graduated from my undergrad in 2016. I was working, and then I started my master's in 2018, and that was because I get this question a lot, like, should I do a master's? Like, should I do it right away?
Yeah.
Wait, and I personally like recommend like waiting because what you
Ah,
graduated in may not necessarily be the thing you want to like stay in or study in, and you may realize like you're actually really interested in something else. So having that time to work and try out different types of jobs and roles and see what you like and don't like, I think it gives people the space to decide if a master's degree is like right for them, and if so, like which space they want to be in. So I'm really glad that I took the time to just work, because then I
mhm.
realized like I don't want to do a master's in engineering. Like it was around that time when I realized maybe I want to do something else other than engineering. So the master's was kind of like the catalyst to figure out like what else could I do.
That's awesome. We have a question here. Michael is asking, how were you able to get your first job as an engineer, and how did you apply this job towards becoming a professional engineer?
Mm. Yeah, good question. Okay, so I graduated from biomedical engineering, and in Ottawa, there was not a very big biotech industry. That's just we just don't have that many companies here in Ottawa. So my kind of decision point at that time was like, okay, either I could move like to Montreal or Toronto, where there are more biotech companies, and stay in my industry that I studied, but I would have to move cities. Or I could stay in Ottawa and try to find an engineering job in Ottawa based on the industries that are in Ottawa. So Ottawa has obviously a lot of government, employers, a lot of like defense companies. So that's kind of where I focused on. So I basically pivoted from biomedical engineering to defense. I knew people that worked in the defense industry in my family, so I was able to kind of leverage those connections to basically get my first job working at General Dynamics, which is a defense contractor in Ottawa. But it wasn't like what I initially thought I wanted. I was very like hard set on I want to go into biomedical engineering. That's what I studied. But once I started working in the aerospace industry, I realized like this is also interesting, and I can learn from this, even though it's not what I initially wanted. Like I can, make the best of it and really learn from it. So, and then to the second question about how do I apply that towards becoming a professional engineer. So I stayed at that first company that I worked at for about 5.5 years, and about like four and a half of those years were working in like hands-on, like applied engineering, and you need 4 years or 48 months of like applied engineering experience to apply for your professional engineering license. So my strategy was basically stay at one company until I get my engineering license. And once I have my license, then I can kind of move on to something else.
That is super, super interesting. And I like the perspective of, doing your master's degree afterwards, because it does give you the opportunity to actually be in the workforce, actually test things out. And at
Mhm.
that point also, I know the biggest thing when I'm working with a lot of my clients is that they're often already mid-career, and then they feel like, oh, I'm too old to now pursue this or pursue that. But you did it in a time where you're still kind of starting off your career. So I find that is an amazing strategy. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it's a really, really good strategy. Would you say that this is what enabled you to now get into project management, or was it like along the way as you were pursuing your career that you decided you wanted to shift into project management?
Mhm. So I would say it was fairly early on, like when I was still working in like as an engineer, that I kind of gravitated towards like project management type activities. So, helping create processes for my team so that, the tasks we were doing on a day-to-day basis were more streamlined, that we had kind of standard operating procedures to follow, helping organize just kind of help organize the team's work to make it more efficient, make sure we all understood what we were working on, like what the scope was. Like I just naturally gravitated towards like project management-y type stuff. And then I had the opportunity to take on a couple of like smaller project management responsibilities at the first company I worked at. And what really kind of I guess excited me about that compared to engineering was like when at least in the industry and the company I was working on in engineering, I had like a very small piece of like the system that I was working on that I was responsible for. And that's pretty common for most engineers. Like you're responsible for one area that you're an expert in, you kind of focus on that. You don't necessarily have visibility into like the entire product or system that is being built. You just have like your little area. But what I really enjoyed about project management and being able to like oversee like activities was that I could kind of see things end to end, and that was really satisfying for me to have kind of like the big picture view. Although I am like detail oriented, I am a much like bigger picture kind of person. That's like how my brain works. I need to understand like how everything connects together, and project management is like really great for that. It just like works well with my brain. It's very compatible with the my personality. Um, so I think I just started kind of slowly taking steps towards like roles and opportunities that had more of a project management component. So the first company I worked at, there wasn't really a pathway for me to in the time frame I wanted to like become a project manager. So that's when I decided I needed to switch companies so I could get the like hands-on project management experience that I wanted. But I would say to your question about like did my master's degree kind of make me realize that? I think the master's degree was kind of like an inflection point when I realized I maybe wanted to dabble in entrepreneurship. And that's when I started like my women in STEM side business that was like kind of on hold now. But that's when I decided like that maybe there's other things outside of like industry and just like being an employee that I could focus on. So that kind of led to like, okay, maybe I'll try out entrepreneurship, but also I also want to like at the same time like move more towards project management. So there was kind of like two tracks happening at once.
Yeah. And did you do any like certifications? Did you do the PMP, anything like that related to project management?
I haven't yet. I'm planning to get my PMP. But I would say most of the training was like on the job training, like just learning
Mm-hmm.
from other project managers. I did do a couple of like online courses like through LinkedIn. Through LinkedIn Learning, I did some project management courses. I did quite a lot of agile training. So I've done quite a few courses in both in agile and scaled agile. So I'm a certified scrum master. And a scrum master, like there's similarities between a scrum master and project manager, especially working in tech companies. Like sometimes the roles are interchangeable, so that definitely supported like my helped me in my work as a project manager. But yeah, I haven't done the PMP yet, but it's on my
On
list
the
for
radar.
2024.
No, and that's the part of your story I love because obviously I creeped your your LinkedIn profile before before we met for this conversation. And a lot of times I'm working with professionals who are making a career transition, and often the first thing they're like, okay, so what certification do I have to do? What course do I have to do? But then I'm looking at their background and I'm like, the field you want to go into, you've already been doing the work. Although you didn't have the official job title as a project manager, you've already been applying those skills. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you always have to do the certification first. You can get the work experience, apply yourself in the industry, and then afterwards get the certification. And a lot of times for these certifications, you need the work experience to be able to complete the hours that are necessary for it, right? So I think it's really important that people also realize that it's not because you want to be a business analyst that you immediately go and do the certification to be a business analyst or a project manager, the same thing. A lot of times within your work, there are opportunities for you to get those skills that will enable you to continue to build in that field. So that's really amazing. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a good strategy, because then when you eventually do the certification, it's much easier because you already have the experience.
Mm-hmm. I like 1,000% agree with that. And I think I think people gravitate towards certifications because it has a sense of it has a sense of like credibility of like if I have this
Yeah.
certification, then it'll show people that I know what I'm doing. But it can be expensive, it can be time consuming, and especially if you're pivoting and you have you may not know if that like discipline or role is something you want to do long term. So it can be a lot of like you can spend a lot of time and energy and money on pursuing something that you may not even know if you like. So I think you're totally right that like especially if you've already kind of worked in that discipline, or even if you haven't worked in that discipline specifically, figuring out your transferable skills and then just like pivoting to that industry, getting the experience and seeing is this something I enjoy, is probably a much better strategy than like
I agree.
fully investing into it. And I think you're right that like people have a lot of transferable skills that maybe I think the challenge is like really figuring out how to extract that and then like
Mhm.
translate it to a different industry. It's like, well, if
Yeah.
I worked in engineering and I want to go into project management, like they're not the same thing. So like how do I kind of, translate them? But if you kind of take a step back and you look at, well, what types of problems are you solving? Like how do you solve those problems? Like what methods do you use? Like what are the, people skills involved? A lot of it in general, I feel like working in industry, like it's you just have to figure out how to deal with people. Like you have
Yeah.
to
Very
figure out
true.
how
It's
can you just like solve problems for people? Like
yeah.
whether you're an engineer or project manager, people are going to be coming to you with problems and you need to figure out how can I solve this person's problem. And so having like a method for doing that, I think will, be valuable no matter what.
Awesome. And Pamela here agrees with what you're saying and says, yes, exactly. We do have other questions that, if we have time, I'll come to at the end, but we'll continue with our conversation. So, you talked a little bit about the fact that you do now provide career development services to women in STEM. And I just want to know, like, what kind of career advice do you tend to recommend to people in the field? Obviously, I know there's a lot and you don't have to spill all the tea, but just, something that people tend to come to you often with that can help the people listening today.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so there's a couple things. So I think one question or like challenge that I hear a lot is like, okay, so I graduated and I have a degree in engineering, and I'm working in this field, but I don't really know if it's what I want to do. Like maybe I want to try something else, but like there's so many options. Like, how do I know what the heck to do? Like basically, what am I doing with my life and my career? Which is like a big thing. But I think what what I really got stuck on when I was early in my career was like I thought that I needed to be in a role or a company where I was like super motivated and I was like so gung ho and just like driven and like passionate. And I thought that that was going to be like what made my career, meaningful or exciting. But what I realized was that curiosity is actually much easier to come by than passion because you may not necessarily always, even if you're in a role in an industry that you love, the work that you're actually doing, you may not be super passionate about. Like you may be working in an engineering discipline that or any discipline that you love, but you still have to do documentation. You still have to do reports. You still have to do parts of the job that you don't really like, that you're not passionate about, but it's part of the job. And that's okay. So I think focusing on curiosity and asking questions and kind of letting that lead you down different paths will then help you kind of discover what it is you're passionate about. So for me, I when I started working in the defense industry, which was totally different than what I studied, I wasn't passionate about it. Like I didn't know anything about it. I didn't really care about it. But I was curious because there was really interesting problems that we were solving. There were really complex systems that we were building. The use cases that the systems were being applied in, like in the real world, were really fascinating. So there was so much to be curious about and to understand and to learn. And so that was kind of the thread that I followed, was just asking a lot of questions, being curious, and that kind of led me to realizing, the type of work that I enjoy doing, which is process design and helping like coach people to be their best selves, and helping teams perform better. So that all started with like curiosity, not with passion. Like passion came second, and I think people get hung up when they are in a job that they're not super passionate about and they're worried that maybe they're going to be stuck there forever. But I would say focus on curiosity, and then it will lead you to discover things you're passionate about. And then the second thing, is especially for women going into male dominated industries such as engineering, I think it's really important to like recognize what you're getting into, because I think there tends to be a I've seen this happen a lot with like the women in STEM movement, of like girl bossing the whole kind of industry and making it seem like it's better than it is. And I think that's a disservice to young women that are coming into the field, because I think the best way to be successful in any endeavor is to be prepared and to know what you're getting into. So if your expectations of what the industry is are totally, out of whack, then you're going to come into it. And of course, you will feel off put by being the only woman in a room, which is still a fairly common experience, depending which segment of engineering or STEM that you work in. But I think if you know what you're getting into, then you can kind of, temper your expectations to what the reality is. And that's not to say that just because you are the only woman in a room or in a meeting that you shouldn't speak up. Like those two are not mutually exclusive. Like, yes, you may be the only woman on your team in a meeting, but that, I think for me, that was more motivation to speak up, to kind of, show that I do still have valuable ideas and insights to offer. But I wish I knew like earlier on, like I had this idea that like engineering was male dominated, but I didn't really know what that meant. So I think knowing what you're getting into, is really important. And don't let it discourage you, the fact that you might be the only woman in the room, because I found for the most part that, like, yes, there are really shitty places to work at where managers are not supportive and it's a toxic environment, but for the most part I think people are willing to go out of their way to help if you ask for help. So just knowing that there are so many like support systems available, especially for women working in STEM, like there's communities, like WCT, there's support networks, there's mentorship programs, there's so much available. So don't let that discourage you from going into it, especially if it's something that you are curious about, or work that you want to do, because we need your ideas and your intelligence and everything that you bring to the table. So yeah, those would be, I guess, the two
I
things.
love that. Very refreshing. I'm not in STEM. That's not my field, but just from different workshops I've been delivering and joining the board at WCT, I've been attending a lot of these kinds of events, and the narrative is very much what you're saying in terms of girl bossing and basically, encouraging as many women as possible to get into the field, but are we preparing the women for the reality they're going to face when they are in the field? So I think that's a very refreshing perspective that I have not heard very much of yet. And Tiffany says that is such profound advice, and I completely agree as well. You're amazing at networking, building your personal brand. You organized was it Open Doors, it was called, a couple of months ago, led by the WCT. While you were doing that, you were doing so many other things, participating in numerous events, just getting yourself out there and building your brand. And I'm always so impressed by the way you do this. How has it helped your career progression? Do you feel like it's actually made a difference? The fact that you're out in the community, you're attending the events, you're getting your name known and yourself recognized. Has it impacted your career in any way?
Yes, absolutely. I would say networking has been like kind of like the common thread throughout my career trajectory so far. But it's taken like so many different forms, and I think that's what took me a couple of years to realize that networking isn't. And I think I said this maybe in my presentation at the opening doors event, that like networking isn't just going to conferences and shaking hands. Like it takes so many different forms. It can be, a coffee with a coworker during your lunch break. Like it can be, yes, it can be going to conferences and shaking hands, but it could be, yeah, going for lunch with coworkers. It can be, organizing a meetup with some other, maybe women that are working in your company or in your industry. It can take so many different forms. It can be online, like through LinkedIn. It can be through like community groups like WCT, like Toast, like Society of Women Engineers. There's so many different forms that it takes. And I think for me, in terms of some of the ways it's impacted my career, so it's come in like kind of small doses. Like for example, a couple of years into my career, I was at an all hands meeting for the program I was working on, and the person giving the presentation was talking about this other program where they were looking for engineers to like join that program. It was ramping up, and I just went over and talked to him. I was like, "Hey, I'm interested in like joining. Like, I know there may not be job postings per se, but like, how can I basically work on this program?" And we just kind of like made it happen. Like, I basically just invented a job for myself by kind of explaining what I do, showing interest, and having that conversation. And I think that's like the big thing is like having that conversation with whether it's a potential mentor, a potential sponsor, someone that can create opportunities for you. Is like you have to initiate that conversation, which can be difficult because I know you're introverted and I'm introverted, but really just like opportunities don't necessarily just fall in your lap. Like you kind of have to
Mhm.
create them a little bit. So just literally putting your hand up and saying I'm interested in working on this, that's been something that has kind of led me to a lot of growth in my career. But I think the other thing about participating in more of like the women in STEM community and organizing events and leading workshops and all that stuff, I think that's had like more of a subtle impact on my career, because that's not necessarily related to like my work as an engineer or a project manager. Like it's not necessarily directly applying my like technical skills, but what I find like has been so impactful about that is hearing from other women like what their experiences have been, what their stories are, because that has kind of given me like inspiration when I need it. It's given me motivation to keep going, and it's just really opened like my eyes to all the different kind of opportunities in STEM. Even if I'm talking to people who are earlier in their careers than me, or people who have like decades more experience, just to see like kind of the vast array of experience that people have and like what things are what things that people are passionate about. I just find it so, I don't know, refreshing to be able to like hear people's stories. Um, so I think organizing, those meetup events and networking events, it's kind of, I guess, led me to this other thing that I really love, which is just like creating space for women in STEM. And I don't know, I haven't really figured this out yet in my mind, because it's kind of like tangential to my career, because my career is, as a project manager in tech, not as like I wouldn't say my career is like a women in STEM advocate. Like it's kind of something I'm passionate about on the side, but that's not like my career. But I think I'm still figuring out how to integrate the two.
Yeah.
But it's just led to so much, I don't know, just like joy in my career that I think that's the other thing is like not everything you do in your career has to lead to a promotion or
Yeah.
lead to a new job. Sometimes it can just be something that you care about and that
Yeah.
brings you joy, and it's okay to just do those things as well.
That's amazing. And you're doing it excellently. You're doing really, really
Thank
well.
you.
We
Thanks.
only have time for one question, so I'll take the one that's most related to what we're talking about now. So, can you identify a couple of these conferences, especially for job opportunities in engineering? I definitely feel being introverted could hold one back. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so, any top of mind? I know I believe this person mentioned that they are in Ottawa. So, Top of mind, I know there's Technata. I don't know when that happens, but it's sometime during the year. There's also the Thai conference. That's another one that comes up annually that you can look at. Any others coming to mind, Jasmine, that you can refer?
Yes. So the big one is the Ontario Society of Professional Engineers, OSPE. So they host the engineering conference. Just call it the engineering conference. So it's in Toronto this year, and it's a massive. I think it's 1 day this year, 1 day conference, and there's like panels, there's workshops. There's also going to be tons of employers there, so that will be a huge opportunity for job seeking. And in terms of other like engineering opportunities in Ottawa, so yeah, TechNat is the big one because that's like where most of the tech companies are. But yeah, definitely check out the OSPE Engineering Conference. That's the biggest one that comes to mind. There are ones as well specifically for women in STEM. I believe Hacker X. I keep hearing about them. I think that's another conference for women in like a job recruiting thing for women in tech. The SWIST, which is the Society for Canadian Women in Science and Technology, they host a virtual Women in STEM career fair as well. So those are a couple that come to mind.
Amazing, amazing. And Quadro says she was more focused in building the skill, and that is what I'm taking from this. And I think that is a good takeaway for all of us. The fact that it's when you focus on building the necessary skills, it doesn't necessarily matter in terms of the degree or how much you've advanced, if you want, in your certifications or your level of education, which also contributes to us being able to advance in our careers. But building the necessary skills can often make the world of a difference. And then those certifications can come after, or whatever you decide to do can come after. And we can build numerous skills. You know, we don't have to stay in one lane. Even if you started as an engineer, you pivoted as a project manager, which is an amazing story. And then I think the aspect also of it is that aspect of you're doing things that bring you fulfillment. Even if they're not directly related to your career, they do have an impact because they're enabling you to have that career fulfillment that pushes you to continue to do well in your career. So thank you so much, Jasmine, for coming today, for sharing. Last question. One word you'd use to describe your career, what would it be?
Okay, I was thinking about this, and okay, I'm gonna cheat and use 2 words because one word it doesn't like sound. It sounds better in two. So, I would say creating opportunity.
Oh,
And I think I mentioned this earlier. Like sometimes you really just have to put your hand up and really like find ways to create opportunity for yourself. Whether that's putting yourself out there at a networking event, raising your hand to your boss and saying you want to work on a certain project or grow a certain skill set. Really, you do have to advocate for yourself. So I think that's something I've kind of figured out, which I think has been one of the things that has allowed me to try different, to try different roles and pivot to different industries, and to really grow my career in the direction that I wanted to grow is by putting my hand up, by finding where someone maybe has a problem that I can help with, and really just kind of leaning into that. And I think if I look back to where I started my career, graduated from biomedical engineering and working in defense, it seemed really incongruent to where I am now, working in a biotech company that is having an amazing impact on the world as a senior project manager. I wouldn't have expected to have gone here, but I'm really glad that I did, and I think it was all through just putting my hand up, looking for ways to create impact and to create opportunities for myself. So yeah, creating opportunity, I would say, is the 2 words that I describe my career with.
I like that. There are so many people saying thank you in the comments. So really appreciate your time. And today is Labor Day. It is a holiday here in Canada and the US as well. So you you took the time on a holiday to
Of
sit down
course.
with us. So I really appreciate it. For those who want to connect with Jasmine, you can look her up on LinkedIn, Jasmine Shaw. She shares content, so you can go back on her old post. For those who are asking questions, there's so much insight in the post that she shares. So do take the time to do that. Thank you once again, Jasmine, and enjoy the rest of your Labor Day.
Thank you so much for having me, Lisa. I really enjoyed
Take
our
care.
conversation. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Bye.
Bye.